Hey guys, how's it going? Lunar Complex here, and this will probably be the best tutorial I will ever make, or at least the idea of it. So, what we're gonna do is go up to this chest and we're gonna find an ocarina. And using my Zelda-styled item slots video tutorials, you can check that out if you want. We're gonna go ahead and equip it to slot A. And now I'm using my gamepad right now, but I haven't mapped A to it yet, so I'm gonna hit A on the keyboard. And this comes up, a blank music sheet. And guess what you can do? You can play songs on it! So I played the Song of Storms. And basically I have it set up so that you have A, down, right, left, and up. So the amount of notes that you're able to actually play in this is 8. After 8, it will show the last note, but then kind of delete all of them and give you a blank music sheet again. And if you hit cancel or whatever, it will just get rid of that. I was gonna come out with this tutorial earlier, but there was something I kind of didn't do, and that was how you can actually learn songs. So then I decided to implement that. But then I decided to change it up a little bit to where if you play a note and you hold that button down, it will continuously loop that note over and over again. And the sound from this I personally did with my own ocarina. I have a 12-hole ocarina, and I just went online to look for what was equivalent to the correct notes on the screen when you play Song of Storms, for example, like this. I figured out what I had to play on my own ocarina and kind of took those sound bites and put them into the game. And so like I said, you can hold down the note, any note, it really doesn't matter. If you let go off the controller, it will fade out in 1 second. So these are just playing BGMs basically. And as far as I know, you can spam this and nothing bad has happened yet. Now let's go learn a song. What we do is we go up to some sort of event we make and we hit the action key, or OK. And we'll prompt something. If you decide to play a song while learning a song, it will not work. For example, Song of Storms does not go through its typical thing because, well, you're learning a song, so you have to play what's there. And if you look closely at the stone altar thing, that song is the Song of Healing. So if I try and play it without learning it, nothing happens because I don't know it. So go ahead and play it here. And it tells us we've learned the Song of Healing, and now you played the Song of Healing, so you can kind of do whatever you want with that. And now if we click it again, we see that you learned the Song of Healing here. And now over here, I actually have the Burlero of Fire, so like I said, we haven't learned it yet, so we're going to go ahead and learn it. There we go, congrats, you've learned the Burlero of Fire. And now, whenever we want, we can play it. And then, you know, prompt the user will you like to teleport somewhere, and that's kind of the basic idea of this. And so without further ado, let's get into the tutorial. So some of the things you're going to need beforehand, 2 plugins, and I'm using Yanfly, and I'm using the core engine to change my screen to 1104 by 624. You don't have to do this, but I like to have my screen size to show 23 tiles that are 48 pixels each, and 13 tiles down basically, and that's why I have those 2 settings there. The second plugin you're gonna have to have is Stop Map Movement. Basically, we're gonna utilize the Stop Player Movement and the Allow Player Movement so that when the player's using the ocarina or playing the ocarina, they don't move while you're hitting the notes. Like I said before, the 5 sound bites that I used, I actually played myself and edited down to a second. The next thing you're gonna have to have is a background blank music sheet to do all of my image editing. And if you go to Image, Configure Grid, I have mine set to 48 by 48 by default, and I click OK, View, Show Grids. So now I can tell where this is going to be placed based on the same resolution as my game window. And if I go to View, Snap to Grid, we can then open a window, toolbox, grab like, what is this? An airbrush tool, and kind of just do this. That's basically what I did to make these lines, and I just copy and paste it. The treble clef I just found free online. It's a stock image, so I hope that's okay. Not really sure. Oh well. But then after I did this, I had to then make a background here that plays if you run out of room on your songboard or the music sheet. So when you hit that 9th note, this is going to show and then basically delete itself really quick after. Then of course there are the buttons. These are 64 by 64 images, but the actual circle itself is a pixel within the border here. So technically it's 62 by 62. So 62 is the diameter of this circle, along with all of its other circles here. Now the switches you'll need for this, there are 4 of them. One of them is going to be called main loop. You always want to run a main loop in your game so you can kind of control a lot of things at any given time without having to switch the switch on later in the game. For example, you want to keep track of players' X and Y coordinates for example, my transparent trees tutorial. So you want to always keep doing that. So you're going to have a main loop switch, and then a play ocarina switch, a check song switch, and a song learning switch. And I'll get more into what these are meant for later. The variables you're going to have are as follows. 2 very important variables, one named song index, and then as many variables as songs you want in your video game. So I have 12 songs, and so I am taking up 12 variables basically. Alright, so the first thing you're going to want to do is wherever your game loads first, go ahead and make an event here that runs parallel, and priority doesn't matter. As long as the trigger's parallel, it turns on the switch, the main loop switch. Disregard this does not matter for this tutorial, although you will know what it is if you have gone through my Zelda styled items tutorial. This event right here, as soon as the game starts, is going to run and turn on the main loop for us, and then switch its self switch A to on, and that brings up this page with the condition that its self switch A is turned on. Make sure you have action button so it's not going to always keep running, and then don't put anything in here. So basically this event just runs once, and that's it. What it does, it sets things up for us. So main loop, and now we have the songs here. Basically the ID or the value of a song in its variable is going to be based on what it looks like in the picture when you play it. But there's a little bit of a catch. For A's, I have them valued at 1, and then down is 2, right, this isn't right, I'm just saying, right is 3, left is 4, and this up here is 5. So right here, you might think that the value for Song of Storms should be 1, 2, 5, 1, 2, 5. That is, however, incorrect. Because of some mechanic to figuring this out, I thought it would be easier just to flip the song backwards. So we're working from back here. The value for Song of Storms is actually 521, 521. Notice how here it's 521, 521. But you're only going to want to put values to songs if the player already knows them. Notice how Burla of Fire and Song of Healing are at -1. That is because the player does not know them, so they cannot happen to just play on their ocarina or whatever instrument and stumble upon a song. However, if there is a song that you want to be hidden from the player and maybe figure out by just messing with the ocarina, you would then not use -1 and you would actually set the song to something and just never tell the player or give hints or something like that. But basically, all of these songs that you will use in your video game should probably be -1 because the player then has to learn them throughout the game. Keep in mind I have a test song here called AAAA song, which is a value of 1111. I'll get into that later in the tutorial. That's basically it for that event, and you're always going to want those in a video game when you first start, no matter what. Now what I'm going to go over is the item that you actually need. So if we go to items in our database, scroll down, we have Ocarina. Some of you who have went through my Zelda styled items tutorial may have noticed that this is actually taking up the gloves position of my whole mechanic for being able to put these into a Zelda styled item icon slots at the top. Instead of creating a whole new item for this tutorial or this idea, I just overlapped everything Ocarina related on top of gloves. Now everything behind the scenes is labeled as gloves, but to the player they only see Ocarina, so it doesn't really matter. So what you're going to do is just create a regular item, key item, scope, none, use from the menu screen. Make sure it's not consumable because you don't want to eat an ocarina. And basically what you're going to want to do is, this is kind of where a little branch happens, a little split in the tutorial. If you have not gone through my Zelda styled items tutorial, go ahead and make sure this item's effect is use ocarina. So go ahead and make a common event, label it use Ocarina, and have this use that common event when it plays. Now, if you have done my Zelda styled items tutorial, you want it to basically match the equipped common event scheme I had in that tutorial. So like how Power Gloves goes to equipped Power Gloves and Ocarina goes to equipped gloves, but I have taken gloves basically out of the game. Alright, so let's now get into the most difficult part of this tutorial, and that's setting up all of the common events. So the first one I want to talk about is the very first common event you should always have, which is main loop, trigger parallel, switch on by the main loop switch. And in this whole entire common event, you'll probably most likely have things like control variable, player X or Y is equal to game data map character map Y. So in this, you typically have things tracking the player's coordinates, but I'm taking those out for now, so because we don't technically need them to play an ocarina. But what I do, however, have here is a big if statement, and I'm going to be calling these conditional branches here that you typically make, I'm going to call them if statements because it's just easier to say. It's more of what I'm used to. They're the same thing, so just remember that. So this is pretty easy to follow through. So what you're going to do is have a first if statement here that is play ocarina is on. So if play ocarina is on, we're going to go ahead and go inside this if statement. And there's nothing at the end here you really have to worry about. The next if statement is going to be if OK is pressed down. So if we go into here, if you go to the fourth page of your conditional branch or if statement, we have button OK is pressed. And then we're also going to create an else branch as well. Go ahead and click OK. And so right under this, if the player has pressed down the OK button, we're going to play a BGM labeled A, because when they hit the OK button, it's going to play a note. And this note is that. And now you may notice it's skipping every second a little bit. That's because I just didn't edit the sound to perfectly kind of overlap itself. What you would typically do is, I guess, play a longer note on your ocarina or whatever instrument you would use for this and just make it last maybe 10 seconds. And I don't think someone's going to hold down a button for 10 seconds. That just doesn't seem too realistic. But if so, having a higher quality sound is probably not going to have that little skip. If it still does, let me know and I'll see what I can do about that. And now, as I said before, in this if statement, we're going to have an else. And in that else, we're going to have another if statement. And this is a whole bunch of if statements all inside each other. And so this if statement is going to be if button down is pressed, and it's also going to have an else branch. Go ahead and play the down note. And then in its else branch, we're going to do we're going to do another if statement for right, play the right. And then in right's else, we're going to do left, play left. And in left's else, we're going to do up. Now, with up here, we're going to also have an else branch. But all we need to put in there is fade out BGM 1 second. I wish you could do it instantly, but I guess you can't. It's kind of weird. Like, why not just have it fade out BGM 0 seconds? So this is a whole bunch of if statements nested together. And basically what it does is whenever a player, this is the kind of music handler, I like to call it, for the tutorial or the ocarina implementation, where whenever a note is played, all of the sound is going to get handled through here. And if the note is not, or if the button is not being pushed down, it's going to fade it out in 1 second. All right, so now let's get into the common event use ocarina. These comments don't influence game code at all. They just are there for us humans to see it. The computer just skips it. And what you want to be worried about is what's right here. I just put it in the comments here because it looks nice. This is another split, so if you do want to use this with my Zelda styled items implementation, all you would have to do is paste this section here into A pressed. And as soon as gloves position equals 1, or in this case, what I have considered an ocarina, you're basically going to have that same code here. Likewise for B pressed. And keep in mind that the use ocarina common event has no trigger or switch. It doesn't need that because once you use an item, because this common event is being triggered by an item, it goes through once and that's it. So in here we have save BGM, so whichever background music was playing at the time and whatever level you're in gets saved. And we're going to fade it out for a second. Then we're going to disable menu access for the player. We don't want them to be able to kind of accidentally hitting the menu. Although if you do hit escape, it does handle it by just quitting everything, but I'll get into that later. for right now, I think it's safe to just disable it. Then what you're going to want to do is a plugin command. This is one of Yanfly's plugins. A little tip is that if you right click and hit plugin help, you can go to any plugin and kind of see what the commands are. And for this one, we're going to use stop movement player. So just copy that and put it right in here and click OK. Next, we're going to set that song variable we made to 0 because nothing's played yet, so there's no value in the song that we are playing. That's kind of like our current song holder value. Then we have song index equal 1. So this basically says to the player, you're on column 1 now, nothing's there, and that's kind of where this pointer, I like to call it, is pointing at, the first column. So if I bring up the Song of Storms, we have this A button here. This is the first column, and so that's what that's pointing to, is 1. Next we have show picture 80. I'm using pictures 80 through 90 in this tutorial, so that's a total of 11 pictures, which is a lot. I really hope in the future they expand that because there's just not enough picture room to really do much of anything. But yes, picture 80 is going to be the background picture. That is the blank music sheet here that just shows up. And I don't have to offset it by any values because when I made it in GIMP, it was the full window that you have in your video game anyway. Next, we're going to put a little pause or a 10 frame buffer. I haven't tested this without that, but I do remember I had to put it in there at one point, and I just am keeping it in there. You guys can delete it and experiment with it if you want, but I'm keeping it in there. And then what we're going to do last is turn on the switch Play Ocarina. Alright, so Play Ocarina, what does this do? Well, it's named Play Ocarina, triggered parallel, and it's switched by the Play Ocarina switch that we just turned on in Use Ocarina. Also, you may have noticed that back at our main loop, this is now running. This is now true, so we're checking for whichever button the player decides to press down. Although throughout the rest of this tutorial, you can kind of forget about this because it just runs itself and that's basically all it does. It really has no influence through conflicting anything. In the common event Play Ocarina, we have 6 if statements that are big, pretty big. 5 of them bigger, the last one's not so big, but that is our escape clause, is what I like to call it. So the first if statement is input dot is triggered okay. And make sure that the I here in input's capitalized and the T in here is capitalized as well. Make sure okay is in single quotes. Although I think double quotes can work, but I haven't tested it. What this basically does is it checks if the player has pressed a button, but it doesn't count for if it's held down. So it just turns on once. It just goes through once. It doesn't matter if it's being held down or things like that. There is an input dot is pressed, just like up here in the main loop. It functions as the same is pressed. But if we have that, and you press, say, the OK button, it's going to shoot out like as many A's as it possibly can when it's held down. So that's why we have is triggered instead of is pressed. Once the player decides to hit OK, or the A button or the X button if you're Xbox or Sony or anything like that, basically whatever you have your keyboard mapped to is OK from in the game. We're now going to check a series of if statements here, and there are 9 total, and then a little bit of variable stuff, and that's the end of the whole entire if here, if player hits OK. Now if song index is 1, remember we are now referring to that first column here, we have to show a picture in the correct position. And how I found this position was I'll go over, since we're triggering the OK button, all of these pictures are going to be of the A picture because A is being triggered. And to keep things simple, when song index is 1, I'm using picture 81, and that goes for all of these up to 9, where if we're in song index 9, we're going to show picture 89, or use that as whatever notes being played in the 9th column. I'm going to quickly cover how I found the X and Y coordinates. I'm however going to start with the Y coordinate first because it's the easiest to understand. So if we look at this picture here, we see that the A is on this bottom line here. It's more or less in the middle. I'm counting it in the middle. And so what we have to do is look at this picture and figure out where it's going to go. So if you take the A picture here and you control A to select all, well actually you have to hit R to get into your selection tool here. If we control A to select it all and control C to copy it, we click here and paste it with control V. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. We know that this A has to be placed somewhere along this bottom bar here. And now I started my column right here. And now I'm going to turn off snap to grid because I don't want this to snap anywhere I don't want it to be placed. And so to figure out how I centered it in this, because I wanted these circles to kind of be centered in the tiles here that I made. So to figure that out, I just kind of moved this over. You can select this and hit M to move it and just move it with the mouse keys. But basically I matched up the top here and the left side here to this line and then counted over how many times until this other side and this line matched up when I moved it toward the left. So it took me 14 times, so that means if I move it over half as many times, it'll be centered between the left and right. So if I do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, it is now centered. Likewise, since this is a circle, if I move up 7, it is now centered completely in this little square here. So that's how I figured out how to center it there. Now we have to figure out, how do we figure out the Y coordinate to place it there? And Y goes up and down, but in computers, Y starts at the top at 0 and increases as it goes down. So down here is going to be positive Y something. And now to figure that out, I counted how many 48 tile sets it was down there roughly. I kind of rounded to this very top one here. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 8 of the tiles down times 48 is 384. But by that logic, if I decided to place it 384 pixels down, the A picture will be placed here. I don't want it there. I want it to be 7 pixels up. So I did 384 minus 7 and got 377. And that's how you figure out the Y coordinate. So if we look back at here, we have Y 377. And since Y tells where this note is going to be placed in the column high or low, since we're triggering the A button, all of the Y's of the pictures, regardless of which column they're in, are going to be at 377. For example, this A is going to be placed roughly here, and in the second column here, it will also be placed there. It's not like its A is going to be placed up there or something. That's just ridiculous. Now what we have to figure out is the X coordinate, and this changes depending on what the song index is or what the column is. I should really just change song index to column. Oh well. So what I did was basically the same as how I tried and figured out the Y value for it. So the number of squares here from X0 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if we do 5 times 48, we get 240. Now, if it was actually 240, it would be placed 7 pixels off over here. So what we do is just subtract 7 from 240. And we get 233. And so that's why 233 is there for its X value. For anything other than the song index 1, we don't want 233. We want an offset of a value to the next column. So for this whole entire thing, right, here's the first column. So if I copy and paste this image again, we want this here to be the second column. And since this is just 2 squares over, 2 times 48 is 96, and 96 plus the first X, 233, is 329. And then so on and so forth until we get to the very last one at 1001. And so for all the notes being played, every single if song index is 1, 2, 3, the X of the picture will always be 233, and then 329, and then 425, 521, 617, 713, 809, 905, and 1001. So this is triggered down. The X is going to be the same as triggered up, left, right, or anything like that. But not the Y, but I will cover that in a sec and just give you the value for what that is. I basically use the same method to figure it out, but I can just tell you anyway because I have it. After we display the picture, we have to give some sort of value to song because, or to our current song holder. We want to compare it with other songs to see if we've played something. So for every single one of these if song indexes, there's 9 of them, excluding the 9th. For the 9th, since it's a dead note and we always decide to reset the board or the music sheet, we don't need to compare it with any song. Also, we can't because the way I set this up will not let us choose any number past 8 digits. That is why we can only use song index up to 8 because of the 8-digit limit in RPG Maker MV. So, like I said before, if the player triggers the OK, we're gonna have that OK or A button right here valued to 1, and then down is 2, and then so on until we get to up, which is 5. So if song index is 1, we're just going to have a 1. If song index is 2, we're going to have a 1. But we're going to add a 0 to it. And with every new index, we're going to add another 0 to it until we get to 10 million at the 8th index. And then we cannot add more zeros to it anymore because of the limit. Which is very strange because typically in programming, an integer typically has a limit of 2.147 billion, which is many more digits. That's 10 digits, so I don't know why the limiter is here. I don't know why a lot of things, like you're only allotted 100 picture slots, but whatever, you know, you could just keep using them, honestly. You just can't display more than 100 different pictures at the same time, which, I mean, I could see someone doing in, like, if they tried to remake Galaga or something like that, or Pac-Man, but whatever. I digress. So at the very end of all 9 of these if statements, which are separate from each other, just keep that in mind, they're not inside each other like in the main loop one. At the very last section of this one giant if statement is we increment song index by 1, because as soon as this goes through, so as soon as we hit OK or A or X or whatever button it was, we go ahead and check what index we're at. And say we're at index 1. So say we haven't played a note until right now, and index is 1. And now we've played a note in index 1 or column 1. Now what we're going to do is increment song index by 1, allowing the next index to be used, or the next column. So we're done with the first column. Song index is now 2. So the next time we hit A, we're going to be in this if statement here, which offsets the next A note over and not overlapping the first one. And we're going to set a new value, which is 10. But honestly, the zeros and all these variables just signify a blank decimal place. So that is why we have 10, and then 100, and then 1000. So after we increment song index by 1, we're going to turn on a common event called check song. And I'll get to check song later. I just want to go through the rest of this whole common event before we get there. Alright, so after this entire if statement here that checks if the players hit OK, we're then going to place another if statement under it that checks if the player hits the down arrow key or whatever it's mapped to. And we're basically going to do all of the exact same thing, except if you remember I said down is valued at 2, we're going to have 2's here instead of 1's. And also the new Y coordinate for every single down note picture is 353. And like I said before, the X's, depending on the song index, will always stay the same. Other than that, it is the same structure as if you would hit the A note. And at the end, of course, we have song index incremented by 1 and check song again. So after every single note we play, we're checking to see if it's a song. So make sure you don't have a song that's, for example, just these 3 notes, because if you do, you'll never be able to play the Song of Storms because you'll only be able to play half of it. And so after the down note check, we have the right note check. Same structure as before. The only differences are we're going to have 3's instead of 2's, and its Y value for this picture is going to be 329. For the next if statement, we're going to check for left. Left's value at 4, and their Y's are going to be 281. And lastly, we have check for up, which is going to be valued at 5. And its Y value placement is going to be 257. And now for the very last check here. This is basically checking if the player hits escape or if they hit cancel. That is what these 2 little bars mean. They mean or. And that's basically what it does. So if the player wants to opt out of playing the ocarina, we then go through a process of control switch play ocarina off. So we want this to turn off. We're going to replay the BGM we saved earlier, which is what the map background music was playing when the player was there. And we're going to allow movement to the player using one of Yanfly's plugin commands. We're going to enable menu access. And then we're going to erase all of the pictures. And 81 through 89, like I said before, were those 9 columns. They may not all be there. Like we may play a song that's only 6 columns long and then opt out, or only 3. But just erase them all anyway, because why not? It works. And we're going to erase the 80th picture, which I have placed as the background blank music sheet picture, because we're done with the ocarina, we're done with playing it, so that's going to go away as well. I have to go back and cover the check song common event. And I think, honestly, the best way to cover this is if we were to go through a process of playing a song. So I'm going to do that real quick. And I'm going to use these little shapes and stuff for it. Imagine that we're in the game right now and we want to play a song. So I'm going to hit nothing right now other than use the ocarina. So if we do that, it sets up all this stuff, song 0, song index 1, and then it turns that on. And it plays the image and does other stuff. But we're now in Play Ocarina, and this is running, I guess, like 60 times per second in the background because it's parallel. But yes, so right now, what we're going to do is we're going to play an A note, and we're going to place it in this column here, and we know the offset is about right there. So once we play the A note, through the, this is going to fire, this is going to go off, because the if statement here is if input.is triggered okay, then do the stuff inside here. And we just hit okay. So now we go through and check this first if statement, song index equal 1. That is true, so we place the picture where I just placed it. Then we're going to add 1 to song. Song was 0 when we first started, so now song is 1. Awesome. These aren't going to go off because song index is still 1 at this point until it reaches here. Now it's going to go to 2. And we're going to play check song. So right now, currently, after we've played the A note, song equals 1, and song index now is 2. So let's go to check song and off. And I like to put an off here because at the very bottom of all of my and offs, I have check song equals off. So this is kind of a parallel event. Notice how the trigger's parallel and switched by check song. But this parallel event runs only once. So after every time we play a note is when I decide to make it run. But this whole common event is broken down into a whole bunch of if statements. Basically, the number of songs you have in your game plus 1 is the amount of big giant if statements it's using. Notice how this is a double if, but here's one if statement, and here's another. And then we have, of course, the exit clause of this. Or the if you've played too many notes if statement as well down here. So right now, like I said before, song is valued at 1. Song index is 2. So we're going to check this if statement. So if song, what we have valued at 1, is equal to the variable AAAA song, which, if you remember, I made this song equal to 1111. And we're comparing to see if it's equal to this song here, which is just 1 as I said before. So basically this is false, and it doesn't go through any of this. Now we're going to check if song is equal to Song of Storms. So if we look back here, Song of Storms, let's see. 521, 521. No, 1 does not equal that. All right, cool. So we're going to go ahead and skip that as well. Matter of fact, we're going to skip all of these because no song is equal to just one singular A, because then you'd never be able to, for example, play the Song of Storms, like I said earlier. But we're going to get to this if statement here. Is song index greater than 9? No, it is actually not. But for right now, I'm actually going to go through what happens when it is 9 real quick. So if song index is 9, notice how when we play Ocarina and we play one note, only one note in, so column 1 is done, song index typically after we play a note is going to be one more value above how many notes we've played. The amount of notes I said earlier we can play total is 9. So that means after we play the 9th note, song index becomes 10. And now that triggers this if statement here. So if there are too many notes basically filling up the screen and you haven't successfully played a song, we're going to go ahead and fade out BGM by 1 second. We're going to play a buzzer or something that says like, hey player, you done goofed. Here's a fresh new music board. We're going to turn Play Ocarina off because while this is happening, we don't want the player to just keep randomly playing notes. And we're going to show the picture of the background X. That is basically this picture right here. And we're going to do a little bit of kind of animation, so I move every single note picture, so 81 through 89. I keep all of the X positions that they've always ever been, because if they're in column 1, it's always going to have that same X. But I changed their Y value to 2000, and basically what that means is it just moves down. And the higher that number is, the faster it's going to move down. So if the player done goofs and they need to reset the board, it just shows a really cool kind of animation of all the notes going down and kind of falling off the board, I guess that makes it look like. Then what we're going to do is reset song values to 0 and reset song index value to 1. So just like we're restarting by exiting out and restarting the ocarina item. After that, we're going to have a very important buffer here. I've noticed that if this number of frames is not the same as the next number of frames I will talk to you about later, that things can go wrong. And if they do go wrong, I will explain how to get out of them later, but not right now. And so what we're going to do is basically erase every picture except the back picture, which is 80, because this background picture is 80, and we don't want to erase that because we just want to get rid of the notes and show that X that we've done goofed. And that X here is 90, so we're just going to erase pictures 81 through 90. Then we're going to turn the ocarina, play ocarina, back on so that the player can now keep playing the ocarina. Then we're going to end, and that is the in off I was talking about earlier, so that this whole entire check just runs once and is done. All right, so now, if you remember, a couple minutes ago, depending on how I edit this, we played one note, which is right here. So song is 1 and song index is 2. So we're ready. The game is ready to place the next note into this second column here. So we're going to go ahead and, while this whole thing is running, we're going to hit A again. And we're going to go to song index 2, and we're going to place an A note again on our music board. Now, to simplify things, I'm going to go ahead and do this a couple more times. We now just played our 4th A. So we are here, song index was 4. We played our 4th A. We added 1000 to song. Now we're going down here because none of these other ifs are going off. We go to song index, add 1 to it. So now it's 5. And now we're going to go to check song. And we go to this first if statement here. Is song equal to A song? Well, A song is 1111. And if we look at the song we played, it's 4 A's. And now if we count backwards, then we're going to give permissions back to the player. So menu access and allow them to move. And this is kind of where either here or after you erase the pictures, what they're able to do in relation to this song successfully being played. So in Song of Storms, for example, instead of saying you played Song of Storms, you'd have like make weather rain or something like that. For like some song, you would change the tint of the day or the time. Honestly, I think that would be best. Basically, all your actions are happening in this if statement that you want to commence. And then after that or before it, you erase all the pictures except 90, because the background X picture here, if you fill up the whole entire music sheet and have to start over, that controls itself fine, because it's in the same process of loading that image and erasing it right after. So you don't have to really worry about that anymore. But of course you have to worry about you don't want the background image, you're done playing, and all the notes that could be there are now erased. And that's basically it for these common events here. Now I have to tell you guys how to learn the song. What you're going to have is an event that has 3 pages. Now, if you want and make this event interactable without having the correct item for it, then you would just create a new event here, and it'd be like, you'd tell the player, ooh, what is this thing? What does it mean? Or something like that. But basically in these 3 pages here, you're going to have a condition of if the ocarina is in their inventory. And the first trigger on the page here is going to be action, and same as character, because they're going to have to interact with it. And so the first thing you're going to want to do here, this is where you're going to actually give value to the song you're going to play. So in this little altar here, this is where the player learns the Song of Healing. And the Song of Healing, you're going to give it value, the same value it should have. So for Song of Healing, we have left, right, down, left, right, down. And now the values of that are 4, 3, 2, 4, 3, 2. But we have to, of course, reverse it, and now it's 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4. So set value to 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4. And then we're going to turn on that special switch song learning to on. And then inside these comments, we're basically doing what we do before. We're going to save BGM, fade it out, disable menu access, don't let the player move, set song equal to 0, song index equal to 1, display the background blank music sheet picture, have a 10 frame buffer, and turn on the play ocarina switch. But then after this, we're going to turn this event's self switch A to on. And that gives us to this page. Make sure that this trigger is parallel. This is important. And priority, I don't really think matters, but just leave it same as characters. But then its conditions are going to add in the self switch A. We have 1, 1, 1, 1, or 1111. And that's equal. So we're going in this if statement. It's all good and fine. Now we check another if song learning is off. And I'll get more into this later, but this is to make sure that when you're learning a song, you can't play another song and have it successfully teleport you somewhere or go off. But in that if statement, the song learning is off if statement, we're going to play a little tune that says like, hey, congratulations, you've done it, yay. Keep in mind, if you actually do want to make really good music in your video game, this is the section where you would actually play the real song, like how in The Legend of Zelda, you can play the first 5 of these notes of Song of Storm really slowly and then just wait or play it with very rapid tempo or something. And as soon as you placed the last note of a successful song check, it's going to actually do the song in the correct tempo and everything. Hold off on playing the replay BGM, maybe move it down somewhere here and place a wait and then play maybe 10 seconds of this actual song and then like do this or something. But anyway, we're going to tell the player like, hey, you've done it, whatever. And then we're going to turn Play Ocarina switch off so that they can't play any more music after they successfully played a song. We're going to go ahead and replay BGM. And I do regret actually placing that there. I should probably place it down here and put a wait, because as soon as you play a correct song, it's going to cut right to the BGM that was playing before. So it's not too bad, but it does, everything kind of works fine. So I might do it later. Then we're going to give permissions back to the player, so menu access and allow them to move. And this is kind of where either here or after you erase the picture, you're going to want to prompt the player what they're able to do in relation to this song successfully being played. So in Song of Storms, for example, instead of saying you played Song of Storms, you'd have like make weather rain or something like that. Basically, all your actions are happening in this if statement that you want to commence. And then after that, or before it, you erase all of the pictures except 90, because the background X picture here, if you fill up the whole entire music sheet and have to start over, that controls itself fine, because it's in the same process of loading that image and erasing it right after. So you don't have to really worry about that anymore. But of course you have to worry about you don't want the background image, you're done playing, and all the notes that could be there are now erased. And that's basically it for these common events here. Now I have to tell you guys how to learn the song. What you're going to have is an event that has 3 pages. If you want and make this event interactable without having the correct item for it, then you would just create a new event here, and it'd be like, you tell the player, ooh, what is this thing? What does it mean? Or something like that. But basically in these 3 pages here, you're going to have a condition of if the ocarina is in their inventory. And the first trigger on the page here is going to be action, and same as character, because they're going to have to interact with it. And so the first thing you're going to want to do here, this is where you're going to actually give value to the song you're going to play. So in this little altar here, this is where the player learns the Song of Healing. And the Song of Healing, you're going to give it value, the same value it should have. So for Song of Healing, we have left, right, down, left, right, down. And now the values of that are 4, 3, 2, 4, 3, 2. But we have to, of course, reverse it. And now it's 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4. So set value to 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4. And then we're going to turn on that special switch song learning to on. And then inside these comments, we're basically doing what we do before. We're going to save BGM, fade it out, disable menu access, don't let the player move, set song equal to 0, song index equal to 1, display the background blank music sheet picture, have a 10-frame buffer, and turn on the play ocarina switch. But then after this, we're going to turn this event's self switch A to on. And that gives us to this page. Make sure that this trigger is parallel. This is important. And priority, I don't really think matters, but just leave it same as characters. But then its conditions are going to add in the self switch A. This event basically has 2 if statements in it, to where I'm going to go through here first. So if the player, like before, hits escape or cancel, we're going to go ahead and do some things here that fade out the BGM and has that very important 30 frames buffer. So this 30 has to be the same number as what you place in the common event I told you about. Then we're going to reset Song of Healing to unlearned. That's basically what the -1 means. And we're going to turn off song learning and play ocarina so that they can escape from this and not have to play it. We're going to replay BGM that we saved earlier, so like the map, ambient music, or whatever you want to call it. Give permissions back, so enable menu and allow player movement, and delete all of the things, so the background picture and the notes. And then turn self switch A back to off, so that whenever the player comes back, they're prompted this. And now let's say the player successfully does play the song. Well, we check for song is equal to the song that we've labeled Song of Healing, or the value, so 234234. So if song equals 234234, we're going to play a little tune that says, hey, you've done it, congratulations, or whatever. Then we're going to do basically what we've done if the player decides to opt out of learning it. So turn both switches, Song of Learning and Play Ocarina, to off. Enable their menu access and their movement back. And then do something that kind of says that, hey, you've done it, congratulations. Erase all of the pictures and the notes and stuff. But then turn self switch B on. So in the third and final page, we have self switch B and item Ocarina. You don't really have to put something here, but I always like things to be interactable in my video game. If it's just a stove or something, I have fire on it because it's cool or something like that. I don't know, just it makes the game more, it brings more to the game and makes it more, I guess, realistic if everything is interactable. Not literally everything, but most objects. So if you come back to this after you've learned the Song of Healing, I just tell the player you learn the Song of Healing here. And of course, set the trigger to action button because you want them to be able to interact with it. And I believe that is actually everything you guys need to know to have the Legend of Zelda styled Ocarina playing music implementation into your video game. Alright guys, but keep in mind there was that little bit of hassle that I couldn't overcome earlier where sometimes it might mess up a little bit, but it's not game breaking as far as I've been able to tell. But basically, I have 8 notes on the screen right now, and they're incorrect. They're not a song or anything. But if I play a 9th note, that happens and it resets the board. But sometimes, if I play the 9th note and then play a note a frame perfect 1 frame after it, which I'm not going to really be able to do, but there can be a case where sometimes you're spamming the hell out of it and it happens. Basically, if that happens, it will start playing the ocarina with notes appearing on the screen when you're just walking around like I'm doing right now. If that happens, like I've said before, go to a learning site to where you can learn a song, or I believe maybe just hitting A will actually get rid of it. I'm not sure, but let me know if you guys have any problem with this. And that's basically it. Hope you guys enjoyed, and thanks for watching.